In this lesson, we'll take a look at how to manually configure a Spring Boot project. While there are more automated ways of building a Spring Boot project, it's important to understand the different pieces that make up Spring Boot and how they allow us to easily establish these projects. The best way to get an understanding of these pieces is to manually build out a project yourself, and that's what we're going to be doing. So to get started, we're going to go to File and then select New, and we will make a new Maven project. From the new Maven project dialog, we want to check the Create a Simple Project checkbox and then hit Next. Now we'll need to specify some information about our Maven project, particularly the information that will identify this artifact. So to start out, we're going to use a group ID of com.o'reilly.boot, and then we're going to specify an artifact ID of spring-boot, and then for the name field, we will also use spring-boot. At this point, we can go ahead and hit the Finish button, and STS will begin to build out our Maven project. So just like every other Maven project, we will have a pom.xml file. And this is a file that is used heavily by Spring Boot in order to determine how to configure our project. Now there are various ways to configure a Spring Boot project. You can also use something like Gradle. In our example, we're just going to focus on Maven. So here we have our Spring Boot pom.xml file. And one of the things we can do from this file is specify a parent pom. And a parent pom is a simple manner of using pretty much inheritance within Maven. So it allows our parent pom to establish some configurations, and those configurations will be inherited by our pom.xml file. In our case, we're going to select a parent POM. So just click that icon in the upper right-hand corner. And now we're going to look for the POMs within the org.springframework.boot group ID. And you'll see that we get a number of available artifacts that we can select from. And the one that we are interested in is the Spring Boot Starter Parent. So let's stop here and talk a little bit about what's going on. The Spring Boot Starter Parent is actually a starter POM. A starter POM provides us with a set of pre-configured dependencies and other configurations that allow us to quickly get started with a Spring project. You will not need to hunt through different examples and different articles to find the appropriate configuration because it's all encapsulated in this pre-made POM file that Spring Boot calls a starter POM. Now, the Spring Boot starter parent POM is a special type of starter POM that is used kind of as the base for Spring Boot projects. So we'll go ahead and select that POM and hit OK. With that in place, we will save our pom.xml file, and now we're going to go ahead and add another starter POM as a dependency. So I'll go ahead and move to the Dependencies tab, and I'll click on the Add button, and once again we'll look within the org.springframework.boot group ID, and here you can see a lot more starter POMs are now provided. The one we are interested in is the Starter Web POM. So we'll go ahead and select that POM and hit OK. And this is going to contain a bunch of artifacts that are necessary for running a web application with Spring. So we'll go ahead, we'll save our POM file, and then we can take a look at our effective POM, and this is going to show us some of that pre-configuration that was provided to us by our parent POM and the web starter. So here you can see there's a lot of configuration that has been provided to us, and it's no longer necessary for us to ensure that our configuration is correct. And sometimes that requires a lot of detail and a lot of troubleshooting because of things like version compatibility. So all of that is configured for you, and you no longer have to waste your time determining what the appropriate configuration is. Now that we have our pom.xml file set up, we're going to go ahead and navigate to our package explorer, and we're going to create a new class within the source main Java source folder. So I'll go ahead and open the new dialog by pressing Control N, and I'll just type class to create a new class, and then hit next. And I'm going to put this class within the com.o'reilly.boot package, and I'm going to name this class application. I'll go ahead and hit finish, and you'll see that STS will build out our new class file, and we'll go ahead and open it up. So now let's build out our application class. The first thing we'll do is add the REST controller annotation to specify that this is a Spring web application. And then we'll add the new enable auto configuration annotation. And that's a Spring Boot annotation that tells Spring Boot to guess at our configuration using some clues it gathers about our application. The next thing we'll do is we will build out a main method, and within that main method we're going to use the Spring application class to invoke the run method on our application, and that will bootstrap our application. The next thing that we need to do is we need to provide an endpoint for our REST controller. So we're going to build out a new method, and we'll just call it home, and we'll return the string hello world from this method. And then we need to add the request mapping annotation to this controller method, and we're going to map it to the root context. At this point, we have our application established, and Spring Boot is able to run it. So we'll go to run, run as, and then Spring Boot. And if we navigate to our console, you'll see that Spring Boot fires up, and eventually it starts our application. And now if we navigate to a browser, we can head to our local host, and in fact, our new web application built with Spring Boot is able to serve our request. So in this lesson, we took a look at how to manually configure a Spring Boot project, and we took a look at the various pieces of configuration that must be put in place in order to build out our Spring Boot web application. We'll take a deeper dive on some of these areas as we move throughout the course.